Good afternoon. One of the methods that the King James Bible rejectors use in order to deceive young believers who want to believe in the King James Bible and that is perfect is to run to the Greek and Hebrew and convince them that the King James Bible translators had somehow made a grammatical error and or that they had translated a particular word or phrase incorrectly grammatically. And this is often the approach they use, and what they do is they take a very limited viewpoint and therefore deceive those who are aware that there are many exceptions in every language about grammar and syntax. And so I'm going to read, I came across this in the Free Republic, an article debunking grammar myths, and it talks about the English, and it just shows how careful we have to be in English about telling how a particular word or sentence has to be translated a certain way, or these rules that are set up arbitrarily. And language is a lot more flexible than many of the grammarians who want to dictate would lead us to believe. I'm going to say, I'll read here. When I think about the rules of grammar, I sometimes recall the story, and it's a true one, about a lecture given in the 1950s by an eminent British philosopher of language. He remarked that in some languages, two negatives make a positive, which is actually accepted in Greek, but in no language do two positives make a negative. A voice from the back of the room piped up, "Yeah, yeah." Don't we all sometimes feel that voice from the back of the room? When some grammatical purists insist, for example, that the subject has to go before the verb, aren't we tempted to reply, "Says you"? English is not so much a human invention as it is a force of nature, one that endures and flourishes despite our best attempts to ruin it. And believe it or not, the real principles of English grammar, the one that promotes clarity and sense, wasn't invented by despots, but have emerged from the nature of the language itself, and they actually make sense. So when you think about the rules of grammar, try to think like that guy in the back of the room, and never be afraid to challenge what seems silly or useless, because what seems silly or useless probably isn't a real rule at all. It's probably a misconception that grammarians have tried for years to correct. There are dozens of Esdras rules, quote unquote, of English grammar. Let's start with public enemy number 1, myth 1, don't split an infinitive. Split all you want, because this old superstition has never been legit. Writers of English have been doing it since the 1300s. Where did the notion come from? We can blame Henry Alfred, the 19th century Latinist and Dean of Canterbury, for trying to criminalize the split infinitive. Latin, by the way, is a recurring theme in the mythology of English grammar. 1864, Alfred published a very popular grammar book, A Plea for the Queen's English, in which he declared that that was part of the infinitive and that the parts were inseparable. False on both counts. He was probably influenced by the fact that the infinitive, the simplest form of a verb, is one word in Latin and thus can't be split. So, for example, you shouldn't put an adverb like boldly in the middle of the infinitive phrase to go, as in boldly go. Tell that to Gene Rottenberry. Grammarians began to challenge Alfred almost immediately. By the early 20th century, the most respected authorities on English, and you should list some names here, were vigorously debunking the split infinitive myth and explaining that splitting is not only acceptable but often preferable. Besides, you can't really split an infinitive since it is just a prepositional marker and not part of the infinitive itself. In fact, sometimes it's not needed at all. In sentences like "she helped him to write" or "Jack helped me to move," the two could easily be dropped. But against all reason, the notorious myth of the English grammar lives on in the public imagination, if nowhere else. This wasn't the first time that the forces of Latinism had tried to graft Latin models of sentence structure onto English, a Germanic language. And she goes on to more exceptions, and you can find that article on Free Republic. But the point is that don't be deceived by the dictates of people claiming to know that a particular grammatical issue from the Hebrew and the Greek. There are many, many exceptions, and you have people like ancient Hebrew saying they know that they've got the grammar down. and therefore the King James translators were incorrect. No, the King James translators knew the English well enough to understand how to translate a particular Hebrew word, a particular phrase into English, and understood that there were exceptions always in the Hebrew, translating singulars into plurals and plurals into singular. Likewise in Greek, these people have first year Greek and they think they know the language. When you get into third and fourth year Greek, you do extensive reading in Greek, and there's where you learn many exceptions in translating, and that's what always confuses a young Greek student, because he thinks he's got it down by the first year, and that by the second year he starts getting comfortable, and then the third and fourth year he's going into a lot of readings, and he finds out no, there are many exceptions to what he thought were rules. So this is just a short little video. I just want to put this out to show that don't be intimidated by these people who are telling you there's a particular rule and that the King James translators violated in grammar, and that this can't be translated this way, and this can't be translated that way in Greek, and certainly a plural. We dealt with this on a video which has since taken off, but dealing with Deuteronomy 33:17, I believe. And there was an article about argument about a singular being translated to plural or vice versa. I forget which it was, but the point was is that when we check the Hebrew grammars, they allow that to make that translation because you're going from one language to another, and there's no problem with that because of the nature of each language. So this is, don't be deceived by those who throw a little Greek at you and a little Hebrew at you, and claim that the King James translators got something wrong. They didn't. They were steeped in many languages. They understood what grammar was for, to reflect a certain aspect and the conditions of language, but not to, every grammar has exceptions. Every grammar is flexible. Every grammar has an aspect where when you're translating into another language, there's going to be flexibility, because the language reflects thinking, and therefore in Hebrew and Greek is no different. So you're going to see many people out there who get a few years under their belt, and now of course we got computer programs that people can run to and give the appearance of knowing something. But the King James translators actually were writing lexicons. They were writing these languages. They would write their devotionals in Greek. They could think the language. These people can't. Don't be deceived by people like Brain Howdy and Ancient Hebrew and such. So people come up there and wave Hebrew grammar or Hebrew text at you, Greek text, and throw some words at you, and think that, well, see, the King James translators must have got something wrong. They didn't. They knew the exceptions. They knew how to translate, and they knew the English language well enough to make the correct translation of every word exactly as God wanted it. Amen. Thank you.